Thousands of people from hundreds of families attended the Florida Parent Educators Association conference in Orlando on Memorial Day weekend. I was there also as an author and publisher of Lorehaven, joining the Realm Makers Bookstore to share novels of fantasy, sci-fi, and beyond, all from Christian authors. In March, I also joined the Realm Makers Bookstore for events in Nashville and St. Louis. Why do homeschool families love Christian-made fantastical fiction so much? This is Fantastical Truth, the podcast from Lorehaven, back from a Memorial Day weekend break. I'm E. Stephen Burnett, the publisher of Lorehaven.com, which is where we find the best Christian-made fantasy, sci-fi, and beyond, and we apply the meanings of these stories to the real world that our real-life author, Jesus Christ, has called us to serve. I'm also the co-author of a nonfiction book about fiction called The Pop Culture Parent.
And I'm Zackary Russell, and I was not homeschooled, but we do homeschool our kids, or we did, and some of them are moving to public school, and some will be homeschooled, so we're kind of a mixed bag, and I have a lot of thoughts about homeschool, but this is episode 65, Why Do Homeschool Families Love Christian-Made Fantastical Fiction?
Well, Zach, I was homeschooled, which, of course, as all good homeschoolers know, is the preferred education option for all good Christians, by God. I'm just being a little facetious there. Some homeschoolers may act that way. I do not. It's fantastic that you all are taking, I think, what we would call a hybrid approach. You know, there's hybrid authors who are traditionally published as well as publish their own books. There are hybrid cars. Now there's also a hybrid homeschoolers. I don't know if that's an official term, but the homeschoolers here that we met at these conferences love Christian fantasy fiction. That's what we will explore in this episode, looking back on that last conference in Florida, and then also the past couple events that I got to participate in March. Realm Makers Bookstore is doing really great stuff, going out not just to writers' conferences, but going to the types of conferences where you will find people who love to read these stories. They will walk out of the bookstore carrying stacks of books, and sometimes they will come back the next day and say, help, my kid just read all the books I got. Any more of those in that series, please?
We love the homeschool world that we've been a part of. And we've, even from the beginning, we've kind of had a hybrid approach where our kids have gone one day a week to an enrichment academy. And even now in the public school they're going to, it's only half day. It's charter school. And so they're at home in the mornings. You know, for us, Stephen, it wasn't about, the evil public school system. Because I had great public schools I went to, and we live among great public schools. For Naomi and I, it was just a lot more personal. It was, we just want to be with our kids a lot more because of things we had gone through in life. And we just wanted more time with them. We've loved it. But, you know, the homeschool community is almost like this, I'm a stranger in a strange land, because I did not speak homeschool when we first jumped into this. And, you know, people ask you about these different curriculums, like, do you use this or do you use that? And look, I'm just going to be honest with you, our listener. Naomi is really the homeschooler, okay? Like, she's the homeschool teacher. I'm like the superintendent, and I help with some things, but Naomi is the expert. I love you, honey. You're doing a great job.
A lot of these families are also doing fantastic jobs. I think that a lot of them especially enjoyed getting to go to this event in Florida. The FPEA is this organization. I think I heard that they've been going for about 30 years, and this conference was massive. It took place between Thursday and Saturday, just before Memorial Day weekend. I would love to get an official attendance total there, but it had to have been in the thousands.
Wow.
Our bookstore never quit running. Well, there was a few like low moments, you know, where just a few people were trickling through, but there were no dead moments at all. We were constantly on our feet, talking with people, helping them find books. And fortunately, we had a lot of help. Scott and Becky Miner are the founders of the Realm Makers Writers Conference. And by the way, that'll be a live event for Christian and faith-based creators of fantastical stories taking place in July. That is a live conference in St. Louis, but they're also doing, here's the word again, a hybrid approach. You can also attend the online option for the live conference, but it is a live conference, not an online conference. You can just watch the videos and participate to an extent if you're not able to get there in person. Definitely see our show notes for more info about that. But then a few years ago, they started the Realm Makers Bookstore to go out and find these readers, not just people who are trying to write the stuff, but people who will eagerly buy every book they can find that looks like something they would enjoy. Unfortunately, at the booth, we had a lot of help. not just Scott and Becky, but author James Hannibal was there. That's kind of a brief cast of characters here. James Hannibal has written multiple books for young readers through grown-up readers. He has a new book of fantasy coming out this fall from Enclave. And he also does the Dragon Raid RPG game. There's a whole story there, and you will definitely hear about that later on the Fantastical Truth podcast. James, if you're listening, was great to meet you. We look forward to having you on here as well. Author Julie Hall was there, Matt Michelada, Steve Raza, who writes science fiction and helps out with Lorehaven as well. Of course, I was there. Darby Kern was there. He is also a writer. He's done lots of radio dramas, including the Jake Muller Adventures, and he was the primary scripter for the last two Left Behind audio dramas, actually, the adaptation of the main Left Behind series. And then he also did all of the Left Behind the Kids audio drama as well. So
cool.
His work has been part of my DNA, at least growing up as a late teenager and young adult. And then we also had a couple of pretty insignificant guests. Phil Lawler, the founding father of Adventures in Odyssey, which is even more a part of my DNA. He helped start the show in the late 1980s. And then a primary cast member, Katie Lee. She's the voice of Connie Kendall and has been for 34 years, as well as a bunch of other characters. Her voice also figured prominently into many other animated shows, particularly Muppet Babies and a lot of Disney shows in the 1980s and 90s. She's a pretty prolific voice actor, and it was fantastic to get to know them. And of course, we had many, many fans of Adventures in Odyssey into the second generation too, not just kids, but parents stopping by the booth. It wasn't uncommon to look over and just see a line of people waiting to speak with Phil and Katie, get autographs, sell some books, or at least buy some books in their case, and then just learn more about Adventures in Odyssey. And of course, plenty of them had thoughts about Adventures in Odyssey, largely positive.
If you've been a listener to this show for a while, you know that Stephen and I have come from very different places in life, and now we're kind of discovering different things. And so I like to talk to Stephen about movies like The Matrix or books like The Expanse or The Three-Body Problem. And that's kind of his first time to hear about those. But for me, like I said, I didn't grow up homeschool. I didn't really know about Christian books, Christian media growing up. Even I went to a church. I just didn't hear about some of these things. And so Adventures in Odyssey has been one of the funnest things I have discovered as an adult through my kids' enjoyment of it. My kids are listening to that some episode or another every single day, often on like headphones, sometimes in the car. And it is so fun to get to hear these episodes that I just didn't even know about until I had kids of my own. So, and I'm curious, Stephen, at this conference, I'm sure there were so many books I have never heard of, and I try to keep up on this stuff, but what were some of the books that families were looking for at this conference?
Definitely age-appropriate books. Our pitch, whenever people stop by the bookstore, and largely the signage and the types of covers and the types of smiling faces you see, gives you an indication that this is a fun place. This is a secure place. I've compared this before, like, a bunch of the conference vendors are selling curriculum or science experiments or, particular social activism on the Christian-friendly or homeschool-friendly side. We're the dessert table, I would say. I wouldn't call us the concession stand, but we are definitely, at least the more fun area. But I think that's actually not a great comparison because the books there are by Christian authors, and very often they are full of meaning. They are full of meanings that are particularly helpful or beneficial for homeschool families.
Nutritious desserts.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a nutritious dessert, or it's just a good, fun, hearty meal, I would say. And then, of course, you have readers who have different, dietary restrictions or abilities. Scott does a really good job with the bookstore of tending to organize the books by age. We can point one way and say younger readers over there, middle grade, picture books, things like that. We can point, in the middle and say these are for, older kids or teenagers or young adults. And then over in the other section, which is where my book, The Pop Culture Parent, tends to go, we say, these are the books for grown-ups. Oddly enough, we can't say that's the adult section. The word has been co-opted, and it's a bit irritating. But if you say books for adults, or my favorite term is just books for grown-ups, that tends to work. And families are looking for books because homeschool families tend to have a lot of kids, especially. They tend to be looking for books across all the age categories.
Well, I mean, that's exactly true for us. We have 4 kids from preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school. I love that Scott is saying, hey, here's all the different kind of age categories, so you can just we could literally stick a kid in each slot there, and they could just go hog wild with all the books. But also the secret is the YA books. I think it's like 40% of YA readers are actually adults.
Oh, yes. I'm reading a couple of YA books right now, in
Yeah.
addition to some very serious books, fiction and nonfiction for grown-ups, not adult fiction, I would note again. One thing we hear often, of course, at homeschool conferences is, help, I can't keep up with his reading. I can't keep up with her reading. This person is too fast. And they usually also say, he likes to read above his grade level. She won't stop reading
Yeah.
above her grade level. That's not a condemnation. That is a praise. And that also means that in this kind of audience, you can recommend a YA book to a 10-year-old, especially if it's a book by a Christian author. Now, there may be themes in there with romance or magic or things that some parents might be a little uncertain about. And it depends on the event. Some homeschool conferences tend to attract more conservative attenders. Others are the types of homeschoolers you'll see walking up wearing a My Hero Academia t-shirt. And of course, all those geeky t-shirts lend perfectly to opportunities to start conversations. You are a fan of these kinds of stories like that person is, and that type of person is almost entirely likely to feel at home at the Realm Makers Bookstore. So parents, kids, teenagers walk up and they're saying, well, I'm looking for a book for my teenage girl. She's age X and she loves this kind of book. Invariably, they'll say, a mainstream published book. Like they like dystopian or they like this or that. Occasionally, we've met a few people who are like, yeah, I used to like the Twilight series. And they don't say that as if it's something to repent of. Maybe they should, but it just gives you the indication that these are not, the stereotypical homeschoolers, walking around in denim skirts and never leaving the house. They don't have a TV, those types of folks are still out there, and God bless them and teach them. I used to know a lot of those kinds of families when I was growing up. And to my shame, I used to suspect this was somehow a more spiritual way. Now, as the co-author of a book called The Pop Culture Parent, I think about that a little bit differently. I would say the main issue that people are looking for is they're just looking for age-appropriate fiction from authors whom they believe they can trust. We say all Christian authors, fantasy, science fiction, and beyond. That doesn't mean the stories are safe or clean or what you would say are family-friendly. But we don't get those questions. Is this family-friendly? Is this clean? At least we didn't get that at this conference or in the convention in St. Louis that we did in March.
That is so interesting, Stephen, that I wonder where that family friendly kind of label then comes from, if that's not really the first question that homeschool parents ask
Boomers.
you. But I,
Comes from boomers. I'll just answer that. Largely, it comes from boomers.
but I can totally relate to this. I can't keep up with their reading. So all my kids love reading, and my middle daughter especially is our bookworm. She's our one introvert. I'll take her to half price books, and we'll come home, and I said, okay, you can't finish that book before we get home, or you can't finish it tonight, and read slower, stop reading so fast. Like, I can't afford all these books. This summer, she signed up for every reading program she could find.
Oh,
So
wow.
at the bookstore, both our libraries, a couple other venues, and she's got all these charts now that she's filling out. And she came to me last night after only 2 days and said, I've already read for 5 hours and it's supposed to
Wow.
only be like 15 minutes a day. And she's like, I hit that goal in like a day and a half. I was like, yeah, we're going to put them out of business because they got to give you a free book with each time you complete a chart. Well, that you probably can only do one chart per month. But with COVID, with quarantine, remote learning, Zoom learning, all this kind of stuff, our kids have been in front of books or screens quite a bit this year. And Naomi, she had to get glasses when she was a kid. I have glasses now, but I got them as an adult. And she just took all the kids to the doctor, at the eye doctor, and they all needed glasses. I said to them, look, you're growing up in a time where it's cool to wear glasses and it's
That's
cool to
true.
be a bookworm.
That's
It
true.
wasn't that way in my childhood, but that is a cool look
Right.
now.
It is. And I've noticed too that even from mainstream publishers, we have as I mentioned before, we have a couple of what I call youthful wards in our house, a foster type situation, both in their late teenage years. And at least one of them will get these giant, very thick, 2-inch thick fantasy books, maybe 500 pages long. And she also is a big reader. And that doesn't surprise me now. And it makes me very happy to know, okay, at least in some areas of society, reading is cool. Glasses are cool. Being a nerd is cool. That wasn't the case before. It certainly wasn't the case when I was growing up. Of course, the glasses are a little bit more stylish now. They used to just not even try when I was a kid. I need to get a new pair of glasses myself, by the way. Maybe I can get the cool kind. I was watching at the end of a presentation that Phil Lawler did on Saturday afternoon. He had done a session about Christian creativity, and a few people walk up afterwards to ask him some questions, including one family. And they had an older girl there who was not there to ask the questions. She was there to finish reading her book. Thank you very much. She was just holding it in front of her face while standing up, wholly engrossed. And I love it. I love it.
I love
like
it. Yeah,
I
that's
don't think
great.
she was being, antisocial or anything. She was just really into this book. And I think it was one of the books that
Yeah.
we were selling at the Realm Makers Bookstore. So of course, I definitely support that.
Again, that is totally my middle daughter. So tell me more about the Realm Makers Bookstore booth. I mean, because I've been a part of Realm Makers, but I guess I've only seen their bookstore in
At the
person once,
conference.
and that was years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was it like? What was their bookstore like at this
All
conference?
right. Well, when you see it at the conference, you're seeing basically an expanded version of that. At the conference, you can retail your own books if you're like an independent author. Like basically anybody who's at the conference can, if they want to, sell their books there. But when Realm Makers takes their official bookstore proper onto the road for events like this, they are definitely curating the books. Not just anybody can have a book published or sold, that is, through Realm Makers Bookstore. They're using award winners from the Realm Award that they do every summer at the conference. They're working directly with publishers now, and they're getting the types of books they think are going to be best suited for this audience. So for you authors out there, a little bit behind the scenes, we'll get into a little in this episode, just kind of throw a bone y'all's way, even though we mostly focus on fans and readers at Fantastical Truth from Lorehaven. This is something y'all need to pay attention to, is the fact that they are curating the types of books they offer in order to meet the needs of their audience. It is all about serving the readers, not just reaching out to appeal to other writers. The types of books you have at the Realm Makers Bookstore are frankly the kind that I would have loved to see exclusively, or rather, I would love to see a Christian bookstore if they still had those around, at least the big franchises. I would not complain at all if I walked into a Christian bookstore and these were the only books you saw. And in fact, Zach, with our terraforming project with Lorehaven, our long-term goal here is that by the year 2200, if we still have something like a Christian bookstore, this is the default product. These kinds of stories.
You mean it's not going to be like the bookstore I've taken my kids to before? I'm like, hey, let me know if you find any books with dragons, swords, spaceships, or anything cool like that. And they're like, nope, just bonnets.
No, the bonnets in the future Christian bookstore will be in an alcove. It will be the books of heavy doctrine, cultural engagement, critical thinking, and fantastic fiction that makes 95% of the bookstore. And then you have the bonnet fiction and the little cutesy figurines in the alcove in the back, next to the employee drink dispenser and the tiny restroom. Or is it just the Lifeway Christian bookstore I used to work that was laid out like that? Anyway, in the middle grade section of the rest in peace, Lifeway. Now, Lifeway's still around. It's web only, of course, but no, the physical bookstores are gone, and that's still amazing to me. They used to be everywhere.
Well, and it's very sad. I very much miss them.
Yeah. So the secret then is to take a bookstore on the road. You keep down costs. You are just not acting like this big lumbering mainstream business. You put it all in a trailer and a van, and you go to where people are already looking for books. And they're looking for books in the middle grade section, where we have like a large contingent of the Mike Nowrocki series, the Dead Sea Squirrels. There's at least, how many of these now? There's like 8 of them, like very quirky series. It's definitely reaching out to, younger audiences. There's a whole Imagination Station spinoff series from Adventures in Odyssey.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bunch of series in other Odyssey books called the Young Wit Adventures, and then the Blackguard Chronicles. That one's based on actual story arcs from the Odyssey audio series. Phil Aldering was signing a lot of copies of those. And then you go further. You get some picture books. We have a stray study Bible or two, mainly from some of the larger publishers. But then, at least in this layout, you have the middle table, a bunch of the Realm Award winners, including a lot of the books we review at Lorehaven, and a lot of books that I wish we had time to review, but so many books, so little time. That's where James had his Dragon Raid game all laid out. Definitely a popular exhibit there. He sold several of those games, and look forward to finding out more about that in person. You had another table with Matt Michaelatos and Julie Hall. They both write a lot of fantasy. And then you had basically the Steve Raza verse. Raza's got his own verse. You had other authors
Yeah.
represented there. Some of James' grown-up books were there, along with books by our friend Carrie Neitz. And then there's the Enclave corner. That was on the same table as my book. A lot of the books from Enclave publishers, so a lot of books from Enclave publisher, a lot of YA, some space opera scattered throughout, mostly fantasy. And then you had a little corner for author Ted Decker and his various spin-offs. And then I basically had a little corner on my own for some Lorehaven stuff. We sold some print issues of Lorehaven and plenty of copies of the Pop Culture Parent. And yeah, it's really cool. I just basically just took a tour of how we laid it out in my mind. But it was just cool to have that much space. We started off very small when they were doing, one or two booth slots. If you're familiar with some of these events, you get like a 10-foot table and a little space and that's it. But now it's grown so much that they're able to have more space, more equipment, more room to showcase the books. And therefore, it's a more welcoming environment for somebody to come in. It really feels like you're just coming into this bookstore in the middle of this giant exhibit hall.
So a couple of things I want to circle back to there. So you mentioned the Steve Raza verse. Yeah, I think he's written like 24 books there, plus or minus. So, sci-fi for the most part. Was there anything else to that level or volume in terms of like sci-fi series or, just a full-on sci-fi author?
Not as much sci-fi, no. Basically, the authors who are there will get to represent and get to engage in conversation with folks that come by. So they have the advantage. I mean, they're the face there. They're the friendly face. They can explain more about their books. It's important for the parents, especially, for them to explain what's in the book. Give them a quick
Right.
summary. Steve Raza can say about his The Word Unleashed, The Word Reclaimed series, the Face of the Deep sci-fi series. He says, well, it's about a young man who finds a copy of the Bible floating in space, and then the secret police is after them, and there's some military sci-fi and just fun stuff. And a lot of these parents hear, oh, boy finds a Bible in space. That sounds cool. And then there's
that is a fun book.
spaceships
yes.
and mech suits, and there were lots of people walking out with they've just bought books 1 through 3 just like that, just based on the power of that premise. Fantasy, of course, is I would say it's still more popular, mainly because there's more of it. It would seem. Andrew Peterson's books are all glorious hardcovers. They have their own space there next to the Green Ember series.
Those are beautiful.
Yes, and a lot of people had recent name recognition for the Wing Feather saga because of those Facebook ads you've been seeing around, because they just raised $5 million for the production of that series at Angel Studio. So way to go, Andrew Peterson. You just won the Christian middle grade fantasy war we did not even know we had. But Andrew Peterson has won. The rest of y'all need to go back to training and then catch up, become more powerful.
Yeah. So, and then tell me more about this Dragon Raid game. What is that exactly?
Yeah, I'm not a native RPG, fantasy RPG person. So we'll have to have James on to explain exactly how that works.
Okay.
But it's basically, to sum up, it is a game that originated in the 1980s, not a Dungeons and Dragons ripoff, but a different type of game with its own rules, its own purposes, that was made to function as a discipleship tool. It was made for youth groups, and kids to engage in scripture memory, even as they were engaging their imaginations.
Wow.
So you open this box and you got all these rule books and cards and all that stuff. I look forward to having James demonstrate that in person.
That is really cool. So yes, if you've listened to the show before, I've talked about I had a brief period of a few years where I was really into role playing games, and this was kind of my BC life. There's a whole lot I could share about that, but I have not been back to an RPG since then. So this is 25 years now. That's been since I played an RPG. It's okay. Now I say that it sounds like an AA sort of I've been sober for 25 years kind of thing. And that's not how I look at it. It's just more that I lost interest in it. And there was definitely a time where, like fantasy novels, I just kind of avoided all that. But I have been interested in trying out something like this. There's a sort of a spinoff from Dungeons and Dragons I've looked at before called Quest, and it seems like a very family oriented RPG. I don't think it's like a Christian one, but it's very very basic, very light on the kind of things that might be in Dungeons and Dragons. But but an RPG that's a discipleship tool and a sort of like it's like Awanas in disguise. That is really interesting. I think we're gonna have to check that out, Stephen.
Every book is a discipleship tool. So sometimes I shy away from using the word tool in regards to fiction because fiction is a recreational tool. It's not meant to just be some thing that you use to wedge and get the thing to move from the other thing. It's not just for that kind of pragmatic purpose. And yet fiction is pragmatic because the good stuff anyway is designed to engage your imagination. And by engaging your imagination, you are engaging in discipleship. You are teaching, not with a lecture, not with nonfiction, not with a diagram of the multiplication tables, but discipleship is nonetheless going on. And of course, disciple is basically the same root word as discipline. You are saying not this, instead this. And it's for the good of the person who is learning and for the good of the teacher as well. All of these books can function as means of discipleship and not evangelism, not preaching. I think we need to have an episode about that at some point. Preaching is just one way to disciple a person. Even in the local church environment, you have small groups and music and other means of discipleship. Fiction is an amazing gift that we can enjoy in order to become more like Jesus, which is the point of discipleship, and which is largely the point of the books that you'll find at Realm Makers Bookstore.
Well, that is very much in line, with Deuteronomy 6, where it says, listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk
Yes.
about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. So, the idea is that discipleship, especially of our children, is always ongoing. We do have a set time with our family where we talk about the Bible. We always say, look, discussing the Bible is for any time of the
Yes.
day. It's for any activity. It's not just on Sundays. It's not just on, the mornings or the evenings. It is all the time. It's time to talk about the Bible. And we've tried to normalize that as much as possible, that it can always be a time to spend time with God. When we are new parents, this was the church we went to at the time. This was always their emphasis, that we see parenting and we see discipleship as kind of a constantly ongoing process that happens everywhere. So don't, in other words, don't look at church like this is a program I take my kids to once a week, but this is the training program for parents to disciple at all times and through all avenues. And so I think you're absolutely right with that, Stephen, that every book that we read should be an avenue to teach our kids truth.
Particularly if it's a book by a Christian author, which again does not make them entirely safe. There may be ideas or there may be things in the book that your child or your young reader is not ready for. Even in that case, that is an opportunity to engage that kind of book. If your child can handle it without more than the usual level of sin, then even a book like that, especially if your child is reading above his or her grade level, that's a fantastic opportunity for a new stage or a growing stage of discipleship.
Let me carefully step on a landmine here. I think we also have to recognize Christians come from very different denominational perspectives, and you're going to run into some of that with books, right? But still, it's good to explore those things, to know the differences of Christian opinion about whatever it is, because we have to sort of be able to represent what our brothers in Christ think differently, so that we can have better conversations with neighbors, with friends, coworkers, what have you. So I think even that is a win, is that you can see some different perspectives theologically. Not that we should pick and choose everything. I think we should have a denominational perspective that we hold to unashamedly. Not, I don't mean dogmatically. Stephen, I've kind of grown in this area. Just as an aside, I used to be very anti-denominational. People would ask me in college, well, what denomination do you belong to? And I'm like, I don't. I belong to Christ. Like, I'm not Paul. I'm not Apollos. I belong to Christ. In a sense, there's a point to that. But I think that we sort of have to know better, not only the denominations that we belong to, but those of other Christians we meet, so that we don't create these caricatures of other people.
I so agree with that. That's another future podcast episode. We seem to keep finding those even when we're in the middle of our current topic. In this case, I can't tell what denomination they are. They are homeschool.
Well,
They're
that's good.
homeschool Americans. It's not that they're all dressing alike or something. But at least, I mean, there may be a self-selection bias here, but those who came to the Realm Makers Bookstore are there because they already want what it is they see. And a lot of them come in and they've never been there before. Realm Makers Bookstore was at FPEA in 2019. Obviously, there was no live conference in 2020.
2020.
And people will come back. I saw a few people coming back who said, I was here in 2019. I'm back for more. I'm back for book 2. Someone said about Becky Miner's fantasy series. And we just get into all these fantastic conversations, whether or not a person is familiar with the bookstore. Usually, if we explain what it is we do, you can see the eyes go wide. I love seeing the eyes go wide because you realize that you have tapped into a desire that either they knew they had and couldn't find fulfilled, or you tapped into something they did not even know they needed. They'd been making do with superhero movies or mainstream fantasy that their teen or older child just cannot put down. The thought of finding not the Christian alternative, like diet fantasy, but you're finding amazing stories, equally amazing stories from Christian authors in all of these genres. And I love seeing the looks on the fans' faces. I mean, plenty of those looks I saw when they walked up to look at the Odyssey titles. And there's Phil Lawler, Odyssey founding father, sitting right there with Connie Kendall Lee. And he may start talking and they may not recognize his voice, even though he's done dozens and dozens of Odyssey voices over the years. But when Katie Lee starts talking and you see the eyes go wide and they go, wait, what? And you see this little cognitive dissonance. She sounds like Connie from the audio drama. And like Connie, the character, has been in her teens and 20s over 30 years. Even the creators now will laugh at some of the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey effects of their own time scale. But, she's not in her teens and 20s, shall we say. And yet she sounds like it. And she's fantastic. And she loves engaging with the fans and just very gracious in the responses of these fans who go, oh my goodness, you're Connie. Like everyone wants to take pictures. I got to take some of the pictures for folks. Like it became a Santa at the mall type scenario, or like what would happen if William Shatner went to a fan convention and was signing autographs. I mean, this is the equivalent of the celebrity actor, the celebrity booth guest for attenders at the Homeschool conference.
That's really cool. So what were some memorable moments for you with talking to these readers? What were some, give me some good quotes that they said. I'd love to hear exactly what they said.
Well, on a personal note, I mean, there's one or two scenarios where someone will walk up or be directed to me and they'll say, hey, I'm looking for a book that will help me understand what my kid is reading, that will help me, better discern these kinds of materials as a parent, from a biblical perspective. And they've literally just pitched to me the topic of the pop culture parent helping kids engage their world for Christ. And I will say at the at the booths, like this is obviously not the top seller there. I'm a nonfiction book about fiction. One of these days, I may have my own fiction to offer. But as for now, like this is the book that I'm representing, as well as Lorehaven itself. But when someone comes up and gives me that pitch, I can say, it's hard not to be enthusiastic because this just hits me at the sweet spot, creator, author, and customer service. I go, I literally have just the book you described. And it's, from a capitalistic perspective, it's a easy sell, but it's more important just to know you helped to find the very book that person was looking for. And hopefully they're going to enjoy it. Our reviews have been pretty good. Certainly helps to have 3 authors pooling their talents for that. But you really have done some good, which especially after a pandemic and the rough seasons and just the ministry of normal family life and normal day jobs and stuff. I learned to welcome those kinds of conversations. Same thing when people walk up saying, I'm looking for, my kid likes science fiction or my kid likes fantasy. The Odyssey fans or the Andrew Peterson fans or any of those people who already know about the book or already are pretty sure they're going to like it. Like you get to find that for them and you get to have those kinds of conversations.
That's great. Now, earlier you had mentioned you sort of had like a tip or some advice for Christian authors. So we normally don't talk on an authorly level. We don't talk about writing on this podcast. This is for readers. but we know that a lot of writers listen to this show. So what was some of your thoughts that you wanted to give to Christian writers?
Just the normalcy of this approach really strikes me every time we try it. These are normal books to at least this group. If you've been in a
Mm,
church, particularly, or you have, like, if you're trying to create these kinds of stories, maybe try to publish them, then maybe you've grown up with the perception that this is weird. And either that leads you as a creator to kind of shrink back. And, if you feel weird, you lack the confidence in this kind of story, even if it's a good story, or others might go, "Yes, I'm weird," and then they go all edge lord about it. My story is weird. There's no humans anywhere. There's no idea whatsoever in the story that you could relate to on a human level. The title of my fantasy world and the title of my novel is absolutely unpronounceable. Those kinds of stories are not going to do very well once you get them out into the air in front of these kinds of readers. And I would suggest, in particular, for Christian made fantasy and sci-fi, that this type of audience is the future. Is the future.
mm,
If you still got the idea, if an author still has an idea that they're going to make this story, they're going to publish it or have it published, and then it's going to take the secular world by storm and move mountains for Christ in the mainstream audiences, you're dreaming. I'm pretty sure you're dreaming. I mean, maybe it's a good dream, maybe it's well intended, but I think all of the evidence is against that kind of outreach. I think that it might be better to think in terms of these kinds of readers. They already love this kind of story. They're not going to be spooked if you say it's from a Christian author. In fact, that's a point in your favor. And you don't have to be overtly outrageous or subversive to these types of audiences. Uh, they would like to feel secure around you. They may like to feel,
mm,
like they're enjoying the conversation with an author. They certainly would not want to feel that the author has it in for someone who makes a more conservative education choice, or who has a large family,
mm.
or comes from a denomination that believes differently from you. There's no room for that kind of untrustworthy gestures here. And,
Yeah.
and an
Yeah.
author who wants to make inroads in with this audience would need to learn to respect them and build trust with these types of folks. There's also no room when you're actually going out to sign books or sell books, whether it's yours or someone else. There's not a lot of room for being introverted. I'm not, I'm not sure how else to say
Yeah.
that. Like most of us, we're not sitting down. Like, you would sit down to take a break, but for me, like, I like to stand up. I like to mingle. I find
Mm,
that it actually doesn't cost energy. It actually helps to give me energy, but that has taken some practice. But it maybe in my case, it helped that I really, really want to do that. I don't want to be just the disconnected brain, with my fantasy maps and as a fantasy creator plugged into my computer and basically practicing escapism. Like, those worlds, those fantastic worlds, are for the sake of the real world. In our intro for the podcast, we say that we find the best Christian made fantasy, sci fi, and beyond, and we apply the meaning, the wonders, the gifts, the graces of these worlds to the real world that Jesus calls us to serve. It is in service to the real world. And here at these kinds of events, you get more of the real world. You get those practical questions. Is this age appropriate? What's in the book? What's it about? Real world cover choices and how you pitch the story will affect the real readers that you as an author are trying to reach out to. You have to engage as a person, and you definitely have to learn to respect different beliefs among your Christian family members.
Well, that's so true about yeah, homeschool families don't want to be singled out and sort of shunned. In fact, I was just talking to a friend 2 weeks ago that said, unfortunately, his pastor said things like that from the
Oh,
pulpit, and he just felt very singled out by that. Because I mean, the reality is, it's like what, less than 5% of families homeschool. It's only a couple of percent. It's not very
oh,
much.
even after the pandemic, it's still, I mean, the numbers have been going up after the pandemic. And I hope that they will stay up. And I hope that those who choose this
Yeah.
education option will stay with it, because it is a fantastic option for Christian families to train their children, to disciple them in practical education as well as spiritual education.
Yeah, and, like I said, with our family, we've had kind of a hybrid approach all along. Our approach is mainly every kid every year, we're gonna see what's best. So we haven't really had a particular mindset we've gravitated towards, which, by the way, that reminds me, I want to plug an episode by Thomas Umstattd Jr. on the Novel Marketing Podcast, or maybe it's the Christian Publishing Show. I get his two shows mixed up, where he talks very specifically about how authors can communicate better to homeschool families. And I think if you're an author, great thing to listen to. But even if you're a reader, I think that's a great episode to listen to and sort of maybe help you even clarify your own expectations of what you're looking for in novels. But yeah, Stephen, I think of the Tim Hawkins song, The Homeschool Family. I think of Jim Gaffigan joking about his now 5 kids. And, I think there's a lot of fun. We can make fun of ourselves, but you're right in that we don't like to be made fun of. We don't like to have stereotypes kind of pushed on us. And yeah, I think that it leans more conservative for sure. And so I think we just have to kind of be aware of that. But I love the homeschool community. I'm so glad for all of the friendships we've had and we still have through that. So I'm just jealous. I wish I'd been at this conference. It sounds like it was a lot of fun.
Well, maybe someday we can get you there. I look forward to doing more of them. I got to cameo basically at the Nashville conference, which was a Teach Them Diligently event, a very huge event every year. And I wasn't able to spend more time there, just enough time to hear from the homeschool dad who made it very clear to me, and I think his teenage son also made it very clear to me that they wanted no magic. Thank you very much. And so I had to think, okay, which of our stories have like zip zilch zero magic? Like, well,
ones with spaceships.
Ones with spaceships may help, but even there, I guess that's where I have to practice what I'm preaching right here, because Fantastical Truth listeners and Lorehaven readers know that I'm not opposed to magic. I feel like I'm in doing the biblical homework to understand the reasons why God forbids his people to participate in the occult. It's not because of a thing that looks bad or unspiritual or demonic. It's because of things that can actually endorse the idolatry that's in your heart, that craving to know the future and to protect yourself and to control your world. Anything that feeds that sin needs to go. If fiction magic does that for you, great. Then you need to put it away. And Zach, we've talked about that, and you've done it. And occasionally I've had to do it. But in this case, like, I don't think these books are going to tempt the reader to indulge in that kind of idolatry, particularly in this kind of reader. There's going to be other temptations for sure. But I think for some folks, I can safely rule out. I don't think you're going to be tempted to the occult there, man. You're going to be, you're probably going to be okay. There's other sins you need to be on guard for. So I had those kinds of conversations, and I can't give that whole lecture there. I just gave it now, but I have to just respect that. Okay, this is your choice for your family. I can guess that you may not be tempted in that direction, but who knows? Maybe you are. And either way, parents need to be on their guard. That's part of discipleship. So I need to respect that. That was one notable conversation there. And then the event in St. Louis, they had also some fantastic conversations. I wish you could have been there. It is a lot of fun to connect with people. And then, if back to our little section here, if you're an aspiring creator yourself, then at least thinking on this level is certainly great training to understand how to serve readers, not just to feed the creative impulse, but to actually, if you want your stories to go somewhere, if you want them to help minister to the body of Christ, this is how you've got to be thinking.
Well, it sounds like homeschool readers are very hungry, and Christian creators have a great opportunity to meet a need. And like you said, maybe not chase the dream of being, on the front and center bestseller list at Barnes and Noble right when you walk in, but on these more, I guess you could call them obscure events happening in, hotels across the country for homeschool families who are looking for tons and tons of books. And maybe this is the place for you if you're a Christian author. But to your listener, we hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you are a homeschool family and reader, we'd love to get your thoughts. If you were there at this conference, if Stephen didn't get a chance to meet you, or if Stephen did meet you, we'd love to hear from you. So send us a note to podcast@lorehaven.com. And now let's open the mailbag and see what we've got a couple of notes here from our listeners. So first up is Brielle from Australia. All right, we got a listener from down under. You wrote to us about episode 63, where we explored the different biblical possibilities about extraterrestrial life. And Brielle wrote, quote, I found this a very interesting episode. I'm in the category of loosely holding the belief that there isn't life on other planets. It's not impossible biblically, but I see no reason to expect it. Regarding the connection between aliens and demons and the fact that there's certainly a physical component for some of the phenomena, I would mention that angels can definitely interact with the physical world and even have what seems to be a physical body. For example, Lot's escape from Sodom comes to mind, as well as the angels who ate with Abraham. So I wouldn't entirely rule out demons doing something physical. Interestingly, the question of how the fall and redemption would affect aliens actually can be asked of fantasy races too. Does God become incarnate as a man, an elf, or whatever other sentient species you've come up with? I don't know if I've seen a fantasy novel that takes that question to an account, though I know Tolkien wrote a bit about the incarnation and the mending of the world, so I suppose it can work if the problem is that the world was broken, not a specific man sinned. The idea that it's inconsistent for the curse and the sin nature brought by Adam's sin to spread to all sentient beings, but for the redemption of Christ to only be open to humans was one I hadn't thought of before and find interesting. Still don't think there are aliens out there, but there's plenty of room for people to explore possibilities in books. End quote. Great thoughts, Brielle. I really like everything you said there. I'll have to defer to Stephen about the Tolkien references. Again, I'm still kind of more of a new reader to Tolkien. You know, this whole idea of angels and demons having physical interaction with the world, I have definitely thought about that a lot. I mean, just from the very beginning, we see an angel with a flaming sword guarding the entrance to the Garden of Eden, and so certainly there is a physical component in some way. And when people see them, I mean, they see something and they're terrified of it. But at the same time, they're spiritual, and so they're invisible at times. And I don't totally understand that. It's all. And here's the interesting thing: it's like they're interdimensional beings, and they kind of move between these different dimensions. And that is, interestingly, one of the secular hypotheses about aliens is maybe they are not just little green men and flying saucers. Maybe they are moving in and out of kind of this universe in some way. We also got a note from Caleb C, who also wrote about episode 63, saying, quote, just listened to your episode on aliens. I checked your website to see if Lorehaven is reviewed, but only found a brief description for The Dream Thief by Stephen Lawhead. I read this in the 1980s and remember that the last survivor of a Martian civilization who guards the archives of the salvation story of the Christ, who became a Martian and died a sacrificial death to save them. I only thought it deserved a mention in the larger discussion. Thanks for your podcast, end quote. Well, Caleb, that is funny enough. That is the second reference I've heard in a week to this book, The Dream Thief by Stephen Lawhead. So now it's on my radar. I've got to put it on my list. So I actually sat down and made a calendar of books I'm going to read this summer. And I'll have to figure out a way to put that in. But that sounds like a fantastic book. Thanks so much for sharing that, Caleb.
Yeah, Caleb, at Lorehaven Reviews, unfortunately, just because there are, as the t-shirts say, so many books, so little time, we usually focus on the Christian-made fantasy and science fiction that tends to be a little bit more recently released, especially with authors who are still active or still around, who can potentially appear on the podcast or write for the site. I mean, those are the kinds of stories we do want to emphasize. However, if there's popular demand, we'll certainly go back and readdress an older book like The Dream Thief or any other Christian-made work of fantasy or science fiction that bears re-examination, even if the book has been published several years ago. Finally, we had a lot of feedback in the last couple of weeks. We got a note from Kevin R., who wrote about episode 64, the one about the masks as a parable for infections from fiction and the usual Christian divide between grace and law. And Kevin wrote, quote, when I read the title of this latest episode on masks and the virus, I couldn't have rolled my eyes any harder. I have to confess, I almost skipped this one out of sheer fatigue on the subject, but alas, I pushed through and found gold. You guys really have a way of presenting things that keeps me hooked, and I found myself amening you when you mentioned how this analogy you guys were using would preach. As a pastor, I found myself very much thinking the same thing, and now feel like I may have to incorporate some of your analogy elements into a future sermon. What a great idea to use the vaccine/mask dialogue to model grace versus works. And so I went from a mentality of skip this one to preach this one. Thanks again for thoughtful and grounded discussion and bringing the usual balanced blend of theology and imagination through the tool of speculation. Bravo. End quote. Thank you so much, Kevin. Your note on that literally arrived at a time when I really needed the encouragement. And that's part of why we list these fantastic feedbacks. It's not just to give ourselves a pat on the back, but to demonstrate how much your encouragement means to us. Fantastical Truth is obviously not this gargantuan podcast with millions of listeners every week, and then ads for earbuds and meal delivery services that help keep us in the streaming players. So just the encouragement there is sufficient to help keep us going, because we know that it is encouraging to use these even trending headlines, even a few controversies like this, as means to explore human imagination and those bigger gospel ideas.
Well, and to the homeschoolers out there, whether you are a homeschool student, homeschool teacher, we would love to hear from you with feedback from this episode. What has been your quest like to find books, especially if you have a large family with lots of different ages of readers? And how has that gone? What would you like to share with us? So send us a note to podcast@lorehaven.com.
You can also use the feedback form at our website, lorehaven.com/podcast, where we have the complete archives and all of the show notes for going on 70 episodes now. If you prefer social media, you can drop us a comment at our Lorehaven page on the Facebook. We're also at Lorehaven on Twitter and at Lorehaven Mag on Instagram. Next on Fantastical Truth, what if dancing could control your world, and your world was a floating island among many islands, and you had just escaped from a legalistic order that had ruled your island? Well, that premise may sound familiar because we visited this world in one of our first episodes about the novel Hidden Current. This time, author Sharon Hink will join us to explore grace and true heroism versus legalism and false leadership in her recently concluded fantasy trilogy, the Dancing Realms series. Meanwhile, whether you are homeschooled, public schooled, private schooled, or not at all schooled, we hope that you will pursue Christ's gift of discipleship through the nonfiction teaching that you get in however you are educated, as well as the fantastical fiction that you enjoy, whether or not that's made by Christians, but especially made by Christians if it's excellent, because now you're reading at least a story from family members who can join us in our quest to seek and find fantastical truth.